Okay, I think we can start very punctually. So it's 11 a.m. here in Naples and 12 in Helsinki, if I'm not wrong, and also in Lithuania, I assume, right? And I would like to welcome all of you to this roundtable that comes, I think, at the right moment. When we had the idea, together with Julie Chen from the University of Helsinki, of organizing a roundtable discussing the latest developments in the relationship between the European Union and Taiwan, many things still had to happen. And in the last 2 weeks, basically, there have been a number of new developments that really make this conversation, I think, particularly interesting. First of all, I would like to welcome you from the University of Naples, L'Orientale. I'm Federico Brusadelli. I teach Chinese history here, and I'm here with my colleague, Professor Marco Fumian, who teaches Chinese literature. And together with Julie Chen, Professor of Chinese Studies at the University of Helsinki, with Dr. Linas Didvalis, who is the head of the Center for Asian Studies at the Vytautas Magnus University in Kaunas, Lithuania, and Dr. Vida Macikenaite, Assistant Professor of International Relations at the International University of Japan. We will discuss what has happened in the last 2 weeks, basically, and what might happen in the near future in the relationship between the European Union and Taiwan. So just to summarize some of the events that happened in the last few days. The European Parliament has approved a resolution urging the European Union to upgrade and update somehow the relationship between our continent and Taiwan. Then there was a letter by Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, and Charles Michel, the President of the European Council, defending Lithuania from the criticism that was directed towards Vilnius from Beijing for some reasons that we will probably explore later in our conversation. And then in early November, so basically last week, a group of 7 members of the European Parliament, all members of the Committee Against Disinformation, visited Taiwan and met with the President Tsai Ing-wen. And at the same time, the Taiwanese Foreign Minister Joseph Wu visited Czech Republic and Slovakia. So something is really moving. And one of the members of this delegation of the European Parliament, Markéta Gregorova, who is a Czech member of the European Parliament from the Pirate Party, said we have to stop talking about the one China policy and start talking about the one Taiwan policy. So a very explicit and very somehow aggressive stance on this issue that is really different from what we have seen in the last decade. So today we will talk about these issues with our 3 guests. I and Marco will be mainly moderators. We will jump in the conversation if we want to add something and bring also our perspective. And since it's not a conference but a conversation or a roundtable, we have decided to structure it around clusters of teams or of themes or issues. So I will start immediately with the first group of questions and issues, and then give the floor to our speakers. I would like to know from you if you think that this change in the European Union's approach towards Taiwan is part of a general strategic realignment with the United States in the Biden era, and how important is, in this regard, what happened, for example, in Hong Kong, or all the public discourse on Xinjiang, and more generally the perception of China as a rising power that is perceived somehow as a more threatening power than in the previous years. More specifically, I would like to know from you, and particularly from our Lithuanian guests, what's the role of Lithuania in all these issues, because it assumed a central role in this transformation. And if you think that this interesting dynamic that we see with Lithuania, Czech Republic, Slovakia pushing somehow the European position and the European institutions siding with them shows also a potential fracture within the European Union, because we see that other countries like Germany or Italy, they tend to have a more cautious approach. So we are witnessing the emergence of two positions, one at the European Union level and with some other countries, and the other one represented by other countries that have maybe larger trade interests with China. So do you think that this will be something to observe in the near future, something significant? So I think that we can start in alphabetical order. So maybe Julie can start saying something about this, about her perception or her idea, and then Linas and Vida.
Well, thanks for the alphabetical folders. I didn't think about that. So, well, thank you very much, Federico, for arranging this very timely event. And actually, I'm from Taiwan originally, but I have been working and living in Europe for more than a decade, and now I'm a professor of Chinese studies. I've been also observing the changes, and concerning the questions that you posed, this is only my view, but I also would like to hear what other thing you can disagree with my observation. That you were thinking that whether this has something to do with the realignment of the United States position in the Biden era. In my personal view, this might be a factor, but is not the most important factor. Because I think in what happened in EU basically is some kind of awakening. And I observe, I would say in the past 1 to 2 years, I see a strong awakening in EU member states, that they started to see the problem that perhaps they used to know, but they never really think carefully. So there started to be a lot of this kind of a securitized discourse, like, okay, perhaps, you know, our security is being threatened one way or the other. And also the pandemic in the beginning, China, I don't think China's tactics in the beginning was convincing enough, and that caused a lot of public distrust in Europe in general, and also the policymakers are also very wary of China's various potential threat to the European continent. So I see this is some kind of awakening happening, and it's more about the EU itself. They started to mobilize and discuss how to do with China. So not talking about Taiwan, but really it's related to China itself, that China has not been a convincing partner. In the beginning, I think the EU does have the hope that China can be a convincing partner. After all, there is a great potential for market, but all the evidences have suggested the other side. And then what happened? And of course, our colleagues from Lithuania can tell us the story. And then there are domestic politics changes in Lithuania, in Slovakia, in Czech Republic, and that I have observed already like 2-3 years ago. You know, like it seems that politically the landscape in those countries are also changing, and giving a chance of the former politicians who were more pro-China, they seem to lose their popularities and have a new kind of a government come in. And that also changed the landscape. So the government in those countries become more willing to talk about value-based foreign policy. You know, it's not just about making money. And those countries are also very interesting because of their own experience with the Soviets and their concerns about Russia. So I think China didn't really understand the sentiments, the histories of those states. And then if you don't understand how people feel, it really, at least in the democratic regimes that in Europe, when politics change and then, the policy really will have a drastic change. That's how I see the changes in Europe. And you ask about the double approach to Taiwan. I think this is really true. I'm in Finland, and I think Finland is one of these good examples of being very cautious. It has a big neighbor, Russia, and in history, the Finns are really trying to be careful not to offend the big power, and we carry on with this kind of mentality. This is also how they look at the China issue and the Taiwan issue. I think I see the change in Finland is that even the Finnish government had opened new positions in Taiwan, so I can see that there is some kind of a new interest in Taiwan because of the changes. So they want to open more position in Taiwan to see if we can explore more business opportunities, cultural exchanges with Taiwan. But at the same time, they always understand we cannot offend China. And so they are having this double approach, and certain issues they would prefer to delegate it to the EU level to deal with China. So this is my personal view. Is that okay, Federico?
Of course, it's okay. And now I would like to hear from Linas something also on Lithuania. Tell us what happened. Why did Lithuania made Beijing so angry?
So hello everyone, and I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for organizers to inviting me. And I'm welcoming you from Lithuania, from Kaunas, from Vytautas Magnus University. So yes, my background, of course, directs me to talk about Lithuania. But maybe first of all, I would react a little bit to what Julie said. And Julie mentioned this keyword awakening that is happening in European Union and maybe on the wider scale. But I would have to maybe disagree a little bit and maybe reword it saying it's reawakening. It's one of the waves of awakening that we have seen during the history. And indeed, if you look at how European Union and before European Union was established, actually at the beginning of 1990s, how it reacted and interacted with Taiwan. We can actually see this kind of waves of interest and carefulness that also exist in how well officials behaved. And we've seen some of the moments in history when the rhetorics became a little bit more harsh and, well, explicit. Of course, Tiananmen Square events, and then the third crisis between Taiwan and then China in 1996, when there was a missiles sent towards Taiwan. Those kind of moments increased, criticism from European Union towards China. And at those times, we could also be in a similar moment, I would say, in a similar mood, that something is happening, something is building up, something bigger emerged out of this. But well, we have now the some years distance to tell that not really. We expected maybe more, but nothing that big emerged. So it feels to me a little bit like deja vu that we are living. Well, I was not experiencing those times myself. I know that from other researchers and books and so on, but feeling of this deja vu is a little bit there. So this reawakening feeling is in my mind quite a lot actually recently. Of course, we have some of these developments that well give us a little bit more food for thought. Maybe something is bigger building up. Maybe some kind of transition will happen into something different that happened in the past. And now I could maybe connect things with Lithuania a little bit, because Lithuania, of course, is one of those avant-garde countries, we could say, that is pushing some of that change and provoking other countries to rethink relations with Taiwan. And the whole European Union is also reawakened in many ways because Lithuania did some of the steps. And indeed, what Julie mentioned, we are living in these democratic cycles that we have election after election. And it depends who is winning those elections. And actually in Lithuania, the underlying reasons are very much connected with the new government that came into power quite recently, a year ago actually. And the new president as well was elected some time before that. So starting from presidential elections, already some mentionings about China and Taiwan were done during the election campaigns. And some promises were made that, well, Lithuania should be sending more friendly signals to Taiwan and not trusting China that much in all cases. At that time, Lithuania also had some of the reports made by National Security Department saying that, well, China is one of those suspicious countries a little bit in some strategic areas that should not be trusted that much. So this kind of mood was building up, and also we had some of the very open tensions, like there was in the capital in Vilnius, protest to support Hong Kong, and that protest was interrupted by pro-China kind of counter-protesters, and later there was a connection found with the embassy. That embassy was involved in this, Chinese embassy, I mean. So that created some of those tensions and mistrust. And then the new government was elected a year ago, and already in many election programs at that time, quite many parties mentioned, well, China is not that really one of our best friends for the future, and Taiwan could be this counter, how to call it, friend that would counteract against relations with China. And indeed, when the new Minister of Foreign Affairs came into power, Gabrielius Landsbergis, and he's coming from Conservative Party, and he also selected vice ministers, and among vice ministers there is Mantas Adomėnas, who has a long history of very much criticizing China and expressing support to Taiwan. So we have this mood and background, and also specific people in power who could now push quite many of those new policies that we are observing. And some of those policies, indeed, I have to agree, they raise many questions, how well they were thought through, how many considerations happened, how many discussions happened about these policies, because some of them appeared a little bit like surprise, not only for the outside audiences, but also for the inside audiences. And you know probably that the offices, the decision was made to exchange offices, invite Taiwan office in Lithuania and have Lithuanian office in Taipei. And the wording was chosen that it will not be Taipei something, Taipei mission or Office for Economic Affairs and so on of with Taipei, but Taiwan. So a specific change of words caused quite much of a bitter reaction from China. So Lithuania has this kind of exploration now. With, at the forefront, we have people who are eager to do those things, and Lithuania is kind of testing. It has like a stick and poking China a little bit, and looking what will happen and how much China will react and how much it will punish. That would be kind of like a testing ground in which Lithuania now is entering. And of course, background of all this has, as Julie mentioned, some of the disappointments that, well, it's a sentiment maybe shared with overall Europe, depends on the country, of course. Some countries have very close ties, economic ties with China and with Beijing, and they have more kind of concerns about these kind of how much they want to poke China with a stick. Meanwhile, Lithuania actually has quite a few economic connections with China. And investment was not such a scale as expected. Actually, it was really, really low in Lithuania. And developing connections, business connections with China, it takes time. It's quite a long process. It has this political layer that you have to go through. So many, expectations were not fulfilled as quickly as Lithuania expected. And the format of the 17+1 or 16+1 or 15, it's changing. It's also promised quite many developments that Lithuania, after waiting a few years, said, well, we don't get that many things from that format. So there is this background that, well, the connections that would be allowing to punish Lithuania are not there. And this is also one of the arguments that the government could make, saying, well, Taiwan could replace all those benefits that we were building on with China, and it will be no really bad consequences for Lithuania. So this is the background of Lithuania, and well, we could talk even more, and maybe Vida will add something to this perspective. And indeed, what Julie mentioned, sentiments, history. The current Minister of Foreign Affairs is his grandfather. He is Vytautas Landsbergis, who was responsible for basically destroying Soviet Union from Lithuanian perspective, so to say, and recreate independent Lithuania. So all these kind of cultural, historical things also add up that Lithuania has this suspicion about China's influence and takes some of these steps quite bravely. But as I mentioned, there are many questions behind that. Maybe we can explore that further later on. So I will maybe stop talking and give floor for someone else.
Thank you, Linas. So now, please, Vida, tell us something more about your point of view.
Thank you very much. First, let me take this opportunity to say thank you for organizing this event. Definitely, that's a very timely topic, and well, we would all like to know how it goes further. But at the moment, probably we can only guess and try, well, estimate how it will develop. But definitely, that's the topic of today. Then turning to the points, Federico, that you have raised, I guess the most important points have been covered. Just let me put emphasis on the key points as I see them, and well, focusing on the questions you have raised. So first, well, how we can explain whether there is realignment from the side of the EU with the US, or whether it's something related to what's going on in China and Hong Kong. I would agree with Julie that these have been the factors, some of the factors in all the development, but the major change has probably come from within the EU, and EU has been in the process of learning. Julie called it awakening. Linas, you called it reawakening. Probably, well, I would agree with both. On the one hand, the topic of Taiwan has been there on the table some time before. Well, as Linas, you said, it comes in waves. On the other hand, today it's a little bit different than before, because all the situation, the way the EU countries perceive it, seems to be different. There's even an argument that the EU had not in a way, really a wake-up call after 2014 crisis in Ukraine. It was not in any way related with China, but the very alarm was about security in the region, like military and non-military threats, right? That the countries in the EU face, and that was, I would say, that was one of the very important elements, and it was already mentioned here. That EU countries started thinking like, well, we have to, the relations with China is not only about economics. And in this sense, I mean that it's a process of learning how to deal with China, who is not only an economic partner, but also it comes with some threats involved, attached. And it was like Linas, I think you mentioned, right, that Lithuanian security agencies have also indicated that indeed we do see some threats associated with China. That's the same for other Baltic states. Estonian and Latvian security agencies have also mentioned this in their annual reports. Like, look, cybersecurity or some intelligence gathering, there is this, or even attempts to make political influence through the investments that already China has in the countries. So definitely these things have been thought through very carefully, I would say, in recent years in the EU, in all the capitals, and some maybe a little bit more. For the Eastern European countries, especially the Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, there has been another element which is very significant, this awareness of global arena changing. We live again in the era of geopolitical competition, and understanding that China is changing the world we are used to. And well, with China having emerged as a major power, we will no longer see the same world as before, as we have seen like since the end of the Cold War. And I would say this is another factor which really has changed the thinking of some countries. In Lithuania, just as Linas presented, in Lithuania, there hasn't been too much talk about it. It has more focused on what kind of economic benefits this would bring, right? Or what we have received from China, or not receive it as expected. But the broader picture is this. There is this broader picture of geopolitical situation of the world being very different than some time ago. So to answer the question, kind of wrapping up, if there will be a fracture within the EU, well, definitely we do see the countries having very different approach, very different interests, like especially those that have stronger economic interests. They are not so enthusiastic, let's say, as Lithuania is with changing China policy. one China policy. But well, although Lithuania still officially declares that it sticks to one China policy, right? But so there are different interests. Then, of course, well, another actor is the European Parliament that has been very vocal, very critical of China's human rights records. But this is not representative of the whole of the EU. And we do see this very, very, well, chaotic in a way picture. But I would say that because of the security concerns, because of this sometimes fading trust in China, or also concerned about human rights, and also this geopolitical situation that is so different, we would maybe be able, hopefully, we would be able to see some unity within the EU. Because, like I said, the problems that are associated with that concern interaction with China, everyone has, well, more people have become aware of those problems. So if there will be a very deep fracture, well, there will be an intense debate, but hopefully there would be some, well, unifying points. And Lithuanian Minister of Foreign Affairs has called just earlier this fall, for once again for the EU to have one policy, unified policy towards China, like 27+1. And hopefully this would be started. But again, because of the different interests involved, even with awareness of the problems and security risks involved, it will be very, very difficult to reach one policy towards China, definitely. So that would be my probably the main points. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe Marco, you want to say something? I will put my mask on so you can.
Is it my turn to say something? Can you hear me, even though I'm wearing my mask? Okay. Thank you very much for having me here as an intruder, as I said before, because I'm very interested in these topics, but I'm not an expert on them. Thank you for your interesting points. And yeah, I also think that this growing awareness in the EU is a sort of mixture between an obvious realignment with the politics that are decided by the United States, but at the same time it also grows inside a sort of I wouldn't call it awakening, but a sort of self-awareness of the growing tensions between the EU and China. So, I mean, relations with China are getting more and more difficult. And so I think that there is this new attitude towards China that is brewing inside the EU, just regardless of not interference, but the influence that the United States might have on the European policies. This said, I mean, these tensions with China certainly led to the discovery of Taiwan in the public opinion of the Western world and the EU, probably, because Taiwan was probably little known before, but now it is at the forefront of discussion, and there is a lot of commitment to talk about Taiwan and to define Taiwan as a friend, as an ally, with a society and a political culture that is close to us, because Taiwan is a democracy. So democracy is an important word in this case, but I mean, it is also a sort of like rhetorical stance, right? So, I mean, I wonder, I mean, now there is a lot of, talk about democracy and democracy in Taiwan, but I wonder how genuine this commitment to support Taiwanese democracy is, and how much actually these declarations are sort of cover up for masking or justify, legitimize some other concerns that might be less noble than defending democracy or spreading democracy. So I wonder if there are some, more self-interesting calculations in promoting promoting this support for Taiwan. And then I was also wondering, I have a question or something, I have a personal doubt, because one of the strategies that seem to emerge in this period is that of, like, for example, renaming official representative offices, right? Change the name from Taipei to Taiwan. And this is a symbolic gesture that is very strong. At the same time, I was wondering how effective this gesture might be as a gesture that really help in granting this support to Taiwan. It might be like a sort of a boomerang, because it might be something that China is not able to accept, and actually it could also jeopardize this kind of, this willingness to support could also produce some kind of counter effect. So I don't know, this is my question, because I do think that there should be some form of support for Taiwanese democratic culture, but what I would like to know from you is what kind of more substantial measures, substantial policies and initiatives could be undertaken to safeguard the current political status of Taiwan, and also to safeguard and probably to enhance the power of Taiwanese democracy, not only in political terms, but also in cultural terms. And since, as Federico was also underlining, we work in a university, so we are especially interested in cultural exchange, cultural cooperation. So now one of the initiatives would be that of strengthening economic ties with Taiwan, possibly through the signature of an investment agreement. So I was wondering what could be done in terms of cultural policy, in terms of cultural cooperation, to strengthen Taiwanese democratic culture, at the same time to allow us to know more about Taiwanese democratic culture, and at the same time to help Taiwanese democratic culture to flourish, because I think that Taiwan democratic culture could be very important, especially now. That is, in a moment when, cultural politics in mainland China are becoming more and more restricted, which means that there is a tendency to embed and absorb all political discourses and all cultural expressions in China into the, how would you call it, to be blended inside the official ideology and propaganda. So I think that it is all the more important that Taiwan allows a sort of like diverse and pluralistic Chinese culture to emerge, and we should know more about that. Okay, so these are my ideas and questions. I would like to know what is your take on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Maybe we can go in reverse order from Vida, Linas, and then Julie this time. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco, for your comments. These are indeed very, very important points. Let me start from, general statement in a way on how I see it. And I think it was very obvious in the comments you have made and the questions you have made that basically all this revived debate about, support for Taiwan, about EU's relations with, Lithuania's at least, relations with China, I feel there are two sides of it. On the one hand, we have what you are talking about the support for Taiwan, support for Taiwanese democracy. And I believe this has been practiced by many Western countries for quite a long time through unofficial relations, right? Without expressing direct support to Taiwan's sovereignty. Under one China policy, under unofficial relations with Taiwan, with Taipei, as it is commonly called, there was this support for Taiwan, expanding economic relations, supporting, having cultural exchanges, and so on. So this is one side of the argument, and this is one, probably the side we have had for a very long time. At the very same time, we have the other side of the problem, and which has been taken to the surface by Lithuania. Let me put it this way: this challenge to China in regards to Taiwan, and where I see this challenge being presented, it's specifically this name of the representative office. Should Lithuania have opened the office under the same usually commonly accepted name, Taipei Representative Office? I would say that we Lithuania has decided to advance its relations with Taiwan, just like any other country has done under one China policy, right? What we see now, we see this really like challenge to Beijing, kind of, well, Linas, I think you said, like poking China with a stick, right? And seeing like, okay, how far can we push? So, and I believe if we distinguish these two sides of the issue, then we can maybe see a little bit better what's going on. So it's not only about support for democracy, but it's also about somehow revisiting relations with China. So that's again how I see it. Then what are the calculations behind, if we put it very simply, and whether this is genuine? As I have seen it, at least in Lithuania, I cannot argue probably for all the countries, but as I have seen it, it is indeed a genuine and sincere support for democracy, because Lithuanian foreign policy has been driven, like so-called value-driven foreign policy for a long time. And well, this is the basis I would like to establish, right? That there is support from the Lithuanian government side towards democracy, not only in Taiwan, in immediate neighborhood of the EU as well. But at the same time, I have to say that there is very, in a way, pragmatic view of this support for democracy, because there is this deep-rooted belief among Lithuanian policymakers, at least at the current government, that you can do business, you can develop economic relations with democratic countries, because it has proved very difficult for us to have reliable economic partnerships with authoritarian regimes. Well, Russia would be the first case in point, with its sanctions, for example, on gas, on gas supply, on other economic sanctions related to, for example, for Lithuanian agricultural imports to Russia. And I would say that through its experience, independent Lithuania's experience, the policymakers have learned the lessons that, having business or trusting a non-democratic regime comes with very severe risks involved. So at this, on this side, from this perspective, it's definitely a very pragmatic calculation. But at the same time, I want to emphasize that there is this belief that indeed, democracy is a good per se in itself, and that's a value in itself, and we should support. But like I said, I would like to add that there is the pragmatic side of it as well. So there is this point. Another point. Sorry, I'm expanding probably for too long, but let me keep it brief. But then there's another side that I've already mentioned, like this geopolitical situation. And I would say that there is growing awareness, and especially in the Baltic region, once again, that geopolitical situation is changing. China is posing China is posing a threat to the liberal global order, and something has to be done before it's too late. Probably there is this what's behind this support for democratic sphere. That's also another very, very important factor, which links closely to Lithuania's security too. So that's the main points. And then very quickly, yes, it's how effective Taiwanese office, how effective this name will be, right? That's probably the major issue. And I'm personally really watching and seeing watching how it will unfold, because without this name, it would have gone just to supporting Taiwanese democracy, maybe developing economic and cultural relations. But this is a major game changer, and definitely there will be there has been a response from China, and we will still see. We are here to see how it will develop further. But that's a very important point, Marco, that you have raised, that how effective it will be. But definitely this has a very important role to play in the current policies being pursued by the Lithuanian government. Okay, let me stop here, and then we'll give floor to the others.
Thank you. Please, Linas.
I just want to thank her.
Okay.
Okay, so I agree with many things that Vida said, actually. So I will just give maybe some additional remarks from my side. Again, I would like to stress a little bit of history and stress that there is continuity of European friendliness with Taiwan. It's not something that emerged just very recently, but there is decades actually of interaction between Taiwan and European Union, and in all of those cases, for the majority of the history, we have this, well, a bit unusual, of course, format of interaction, because there is no formal recognition of sovereignty of Taiwan. So, of course, because of one China rule and policy, instead there is functional kind of interaction, functional recognition of Taiwan. And it means that it's based on the interaction with in economy, first of all, in trade, investment, and so on. At the same time, during the history, we observed quite many cases when Europe actually supported Taiwan because of matching values in terms of human rights and democracy. Of course, that was a little bit difficult to do and almost impossible to do before Taiwan democratized itself. We have to remember that part of the history, that Taiwan was quite authoritarian country for quite a long time. And only after democratization, during the past 30 years or so, even less, we could, it depends how we count, we could see this kind of alignment, not only economies aligned and pushed together, but this, we could say, value support is also expressed quite openly by European Union. So, this continuation is happening, and well, Vida mentioned some of those things that Lithuania now is kind of challenging a little bit more, and we will see how that will develop. But we have to acknowledge that the status quo is remaining the same. European Union is talking about quite similar things like in the past, that yes, we support Taiwan, we support democracy, human rights. Yes, we want to trade, of course, and we want to exchange in academia and then cultural affairs, people-to-people interaction should be pursued. But well, overall, of course, still many things are said under this broader umbrella that status quo is what European Union is well favoring, meaning that Taiwan stays as it is, and China stays as it is, and there is friendship and interaction and stability in that part of the world, and Europe will be happily as well supporting, kind of interacting with both sides. So this kind of arrangement is very much expressed by European Union, and support for democracy and human rights. Well, actually, I would like to challenge this part a little bit, because I would actually, in the recent years, I would ask the opposite question: how Taiwan could support democracy and human rights in Europe. And this question actually emerges because thanks to the recent delegation of European Parliament members that happened just a week ago, yes, a few days ago. And if you followed what was happening there, the European delegation was stressing and repeating this numerous times. We came here to learn from Taiwan. We are not bringing human rights and democracy to Taiwan because Taiwan has that very much. But we need to learn from Taiwan. How can you have democracy and human rights in conditions that you have in this kind of background? How do you deal with misinformation? How do you make sure that there is democracy when there is a lot of the environment is not that really suitable, seemingly, for democracy and human rights? So European Parliament members are arriving in Taiwan as students, basically, and saying, "Teacher, please teach us how we can do similar things in Europe, because we could maybe apply some of these practices." So this is an interesting thing. And indeed, if you look at, let's say, democracy index that is ranking countries around the world in terms of their democratic achievements, Taiwan actually overranks many European countries. It's more democratic than, let's say, Lithuania, just to give the first example, and that creates these conditions that we should be maybe asking, actually, what Taiwan can give us, what kind of knowledge rather than looking at Taiwan and saying, we are bastion like of democracy and human rights, and we should be helping Taiwan. I think the table is turning a little bit in the right now, and we could have a look at that from this kind of point of view. So so maybe these are just a few points that I would like to add from my side.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Julie, please.
Thank you. I think Vida and Lina's statement give me a lot of hope, because originally I was thinking of saying something very cynical, and perhaps being a Taiwanese, I am cynical of our own system and democracy. And I tend to see, because Taiwan is always having a diplomatic competition with China. This has been in history. And they're always trying to win somebody over. The competition in Africa and Latin America. And in those continents, Taiwan already lost. But in Europe, there is perhaps recently a bit of sign of hope. And I'm a bit cynical, because what I see is that those states, so sorry for my statement to ruin your beautiful picture. I kind of tend to see is because EU member states, particularly during the pandemic, see the importance of Taiwan in certain areas, such as the semiconductor. This is somehow suddenly is being discussed a lot. Like Taiwan is a very important base for the semiconductor technology, and even have some kind of monopoly. And then, I think EU member states realize the importance. So there is also a very strong self-interest driving those EU governments to think how can we still maintain a reasonable relationship, and also hope that there is a peace in Taiwan's trade, so that Taiwan is not influenced, because if Taiwan is military attack, that will also affect EU. I think I look at the issue from a very cynical view, and I do acknowledge that various politicians, they are strong defenders for democracy, and then they are in line with Taiwan's value, and they wish to advocate that. And I see their effort, and personally, I admire their effort. I know they are fighting in a very difficult war, even a political game here. But I want to emphasize there is a strong self-interest from a lot of EU member states. And the pandemic kind of enshrined the importance of Taiwan in this picture. And on another issue, talking about, I think Marco asked about this, how can we have more exchanges with Taiwan economically and culturally. I see also, interestingly, there are several new initiatives from the Taiwan government. Some of them are actually rebranded initiatives from Taiwan's Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Education, to approach different European universities, for instance, to set up basically to give them funding, to have more opportunities to organize seminars, workshops, to learn about Taiwan's culture, not just political issue, but you can also organize events about films. I think Lithuania or Linas, you know more about your project there. So you also have the funding. And I see it as a positive sign. Although this is a governmental support, it's very different from the Chinese governmental support, such as the Confucius Institute is always very contentious. It's from the Chinese government, and even they try to promote culture. It has had a really bad reputation. But I think the Taiwanese way, I also have projects from Taiwan government. I feel it is exactly what we need. They give us money, but they are not really intrusive. They give us the freedom to allow us to develop our own programs. And this, for instance, I have been doing this in Finland for a year, and I see students have general interest, even public has general interest to learn about Taiwan's various culture, literature, films, etc. So I see this as a very positive sign, and hopefully there will be more such initiative coming. We all need the funding and from the Taiwan government to give us this support. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I would like to open the third and last round before maybe we ask our audience if they have questions, by looking more towards Beijing now, towards Xi Jinping's agenda. And I was wondering whether you think that the rhetoric of unification that was constantly alive from 1949 onwards, but if it has assumed a different connotation in Xi's strategical view, And if what happened in Hong Kong, and I would like to go back to that, somehow changed also the perception of this rhetoric, both in Taiwan, but also in Europe and in the United States, as a demonstration that this idea of unifying the Chinese sphere is not just a vague reference or a rhetorical element, but it's a very concrete political and administrative plan. Do you think that with Xi Jinping things really substantially changed when we look at Hu Jintao, for example? And do you think that Hong Kong marked somehow, what happened in Hong Kong marked a turning point also abroad for the perception of this, of Xi's agenda? So maybe we can now start with Linas and then Julie and Vida. Thank you. And Mark, of course, on the Chinese dream, maybe.
Okay, thank you for the question. Maybe I will leave some of the domestic insights for other speakers, but of course I feel that when Xi Jinping came into power, the general foreign policy of China became quite much more ambitious. We see so many new initiatives and steps that China is making. So I think this is very clear observation that raises no really doubts and questions. And when it comes to diplomacy, we also see more active and proactive diplomatic efforts coming from Chinese diplomats. So all that is creating this environment where China is more outspoken and encouraged, I would say, to be more outspoken. So not that just observing and reacting, but dictating and telling some of the things. So sending like a message proactively. So of course that puts Lithuania, let's say, coming back to my country, of course, in quite a difficult position when challenging China, because the reaction of we could expect to be quite much more active and maybe crossing some boundaries that we would not be imagining before Xi Jinping came into power. So that of course we have to acknowledge, and again we will see how things develop. It's hard to predict those things; they are not written somewhere, and touching a little bit about Hong Kong situation. Actually, the whole kind of development in Hong Kong, of course, for me personally, was a really big disappointment how things developed and what was the position and reaction from European Union. That it was not that really, again, expressing concerns and expressing and encouraging not to cross some boundaries and so on. So basically many statements and not that much really specific action was done. And this adds on my head this kind of cynical hat now that I'm borrowing from Julie maybe. That indeed there are these kind of calculations and of course ability for Europe to react to these kind of things, and again traditionally European Union has no that really many tools to use. There's expressions that could be made and concerns that could be stated, and calls for different developments. But what else? What else we could expect really from European Union? And this then creates a big concern about Taiwan's further development and then the future of Taiwan. How much really European Union will be capable to do something if something happens, and whether there is an opening window for European Union to design something, or maybe it will be like with Hong Kong's case, saying, well, we are disappointed that things are happening in this or another way, and that's it. So this whole kind of the current arrangement, I think it's really based on the status quo and stability, which is stressed by European Union quite a lot, because beyond status quo, European Union does not really maybe imagine and have tools to do something. If status quo exists, of course, business ties and connections could be developed. If not, well, this is really murky waters for European Union, and that European Union tries to avoid, because hard tools are really not that in the toolbox for European Union. So that would be my remarks. I know that I left many things unmentioned, but I'm leaving for other speakers to do that.
Do I need to say something? No, just answering quickly to your question. Your question was whether there is or there isn't an escalation in this rhetoric of the concern, concerning the reunification. I think that there is indeed an escalation, and there is indeed an upgrade in this kind of rhetoric. Simply because this is part of the Xi Jinping's framework, ideological framework. I mean, the Communist Party has this philosophy of history that is based on a teleology, right? And reunification with Taiwan is a component of this teleology. So the Communist Party is kind of forced to pursue this objective. And what Xi Jinping has done through his agenda, through his Chinese Dream thing, has been to, he's been declaring all the time that China has entered into a new stage of history. And as he said in the last Congress in 2017, this new stage of history is the stage of history when China grew strong. And now China is kind of forced to prove that it is strong to the world every moment, because this is part of its orthodoxy, which means that, and Xi Jinping said at the very beginning of his, the beginning of his leadership in 2012, that now that China has never been so close to the achievement of the Chinese Dream. There is this sense that China is very close to achieving all its teleological ends of history, which means that, reunification with Taiwan is perceived as something that should be achieved pretty soon. And maybe there is also this window of opportunity, which is, I don't know, they think that there is a window of opportunity now, and that, I don't know, in the future it might become risky. So I think that while this idea of achieving reunification with Taiwan has been part and parcel of the whole history of the People's Republic, now there is definitely an upgrade because of the current ideological framework that drives Chinese politics, which is also the same kind of framework that leads China to be confrontational with in its foreign policies every time that China feels that it is provoked for some reason. So I'm not saying that there will be a war soon to be started, because I hope there will be some caution about it. But still, I think that they're kind of driving to that aim. I don't know, this is my perception.
Thank you, Marco. And Julie, please, do you want to say something?
I think it's clear that China has a plan to be the person who will unify Taiwan. And the question, of course, is what means. There's somewhat echo. Now I hear somewhat echo.
Sorry.
Is it better? Yeah, sorry. So I just to repeat, I think Xi Jinping does have a plan to unify Taiwan. And what you see in Hong Kong is just a very unfortunate example. Basically the conflict escalated between the opposition and the government, and then eventually, basically, Xi Jinping has to send a signal. We want a stronger, crackdown on all these protests. And that also sent a signal back to Beijing that we really have to resolve those issues in due course. I don't really know the concrete plans, but I can see that Beijing is becoming more aggressive. Also, in recent years, there has been a lot of reports of military exercises across the Taiwan Strait, sending airplanes over the Taiwan Strait. This is not just kind of, sending you a signal. We might attack you. I think they are also preparing for the actual attack. So they need to kind of fly into that area, observe what is going on, and observe how Taiwanese military will react. So through these kind of interactions, they can get themselves more ready for the comeback, and also get their soldiers more ready for this kind of comeback. So I think this is a very warning sign. But this is a very unfortunate situation. Whenever I think about this, I think the story is very simple. If Taiwan is attacked, then it's attacked, because this is a very small island. It's quite easy, to just conquer it. But then the consequences is going to be very, very, severe. Yeah. Sorry, my picture is very doomed.
Thank you. Vida, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your points. Well, just maybe once again, kind of putting emphasis on what has been said, right? Well, to start with, whether there has been a change in rhetorics, definitely we have seen the narrative changing, and Xi Jinping has been talking about it with more confidence, like reunification, and putting a lot of emphasis. My personal perception has been that before Xi Jinping, it was something like, well, that's the status quo. One day there might be unification, a reunification with Taiwan. Under Xi, the debate, even like among China observers, China scholars, shifted to like, will Xi Jinping really seek to unify, to, well, take over Taiwan, or take back Taiwan by force? So definitely there has been a change and also in Xi Jinping's rhetoric, in among Chinese leadership, right, top leaders, and also among China observers. There has been an alarm, like what are they up to? What is China up to? Whether this is desirable and whether China is really planning and drafting a strategy when to do it, I doubt, because, well, no one really wants that conflict. On the other hand, well, they are getting ready for that, right? And the military preparations, the capabilities they have been developing, everything seems to suggest that China is preparing and is getting ready. Again, this doesn't mean that it intends at some point to reunify, to launch an attack, but, well, they are trying to build their capacity. And this is, for me, this is especially, well, worrying, I would say, if the European countries if the Western countries, the USA, start pushing China, pushing it into the corner and escalating this, well, Taiwanese independence or sovereignty question. That's when it becomes really, really a problem, because, as Marco pointed out very, very accurately, that's a domestic issue, domestic politics issue. I mean, that this is like a promise that the Chinese Communist Party has made. And basically, I would say that there are two promises that the Chinese Communist Party has made to the population. After Mao Zedong's death, the country, well, the CCP was really in legitimacy crisis. That was, well, the country was in chaos, and people started understanding that, it's the party within the party power struggle that has led us here. And then the CCP made this promise, or came up with an idea to develop economy, raise the standards of living, kind of, well, presenting itself as once again a party which is capable of governing China. And then there was another promise that they made, or that they have been representing, kind of the cause. Defending China from historically, right, from unequal treatment, from Western powers, from hostile neighbors like Japan, and like kind of guarding China's national pride. And this reunification with Taiwan is, in a way, a missing puzzle in this narrative of the CCP guarding the prestige, in a way, the greatness of China. And I'm not saying that they want, indeed, the Chinese leaders are like going, once again, I'm not saying that they are going to take measures to proactively get Taiwan back. But this is the domestic promise they have made to their population. Like, we protect, we are the guardians, not only of this economic growth, but also of the Chinese, well, the greatness, the great China dream, the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, as it is called, right? And Xi Jinping is the one who came with this. Like, under Xi Jinping, China is becoming great, like it's gaining back its status internationally, but Taiwan is also, like, well, from the domestic perspective, is a part of this great country like China. And that's why I said it's worrying to see that, well, some Linas, you said that, well, there's no status quo hasn't changed, but also in the US, there has been revision of Taiwan policy. Like it's now it's much more loosely interpreted how US officials can interact with Taiwanese officials. So kind of giving more recognition to Taiwan. And it's worrying from that perspective that should the Western countries give more recognition, suggest they are giving more recognition, it would put Chinese government into a very uncomfortable, I would say, position domestically. What Marco has explained, right? This, like, they feel they are forced to pursue this agenda, Marco, as you put it, right? And then if there is a pressure from outside, that's when it becomes difficult, right? So just, and then to finish, whether Hong Kong marked any change in that, I would say that maybe for me personally, or for some China observers, it was the point when we really realized that, okay, this administration is really different, and it is changing the usual approach, and it could also apply to Taiwan. Yes. So these would be my major points. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I would like to ask our audience if they have questions, both here in the conference room and on Teams.
Yeah, I take advantage to say goodbye in the meantime.
Okay.
Because I think I have to go in really 2 minutes because I have a class awaiting. So thank you very much. It was very interesting, and I hope to keep in touch and to have more of these conversations. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco.
Federico.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco.
Okay, so our audience, any questions? Okay, there is a question here from one of our students here. Maybe you can come here and ask it. Let's see if this works. Okay.
Okay. Hello, good morning. I'm a student from L'Orientale, and I want to know your opinion about the question. What do Taiwanese think about recent events? So, because I think they want to maintain the status quo, maybe probably Taiwanese don't want to claim independence because their name is Republic of China, and no one said we want Republic of Taiwan. Probably for them it's good. I don't know. What's your point of view?
Okay, thank you. Yes. So, because indeed we talked a lot about European Union, China, etc., but we didn't ask what do actually Taiwanese want about all this problem. Do they really want to claim independence or not? What's your feeling of the internal situation in Taiwan?
Can I say something? I think there's echoing again. Yeah, so there are different layers, you know. So if you are talking about the government, the current government is definitely more pro-independence, but they are not claiming independence. It's just ideologically they want to emphasize more of Taiwan's sovereignty and want international respect, but they are not claiming independence because the government also understands the danger of doing that you will invite naturally a military attack. And if it's about people that you're asking what Taiwanese people think, very sadly or very happily, because this is a democracy. So the society is very divided, and then people are, you know, basically I would say Taiwan, when it comes to the China issue, the society is divided into those who are pro-China and wants a more warm relationship with China, and those who are really, really anti-China. And then when it comes to elections, in normal times, we are happily mingling with people and living together. But when it comes to elections, people get very emotional, and then they want the, you know, their pro-Taiwan or pro-China politicians to win the election. And so it's there's no one unified answer. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I saw a raised hand from University of Lapland.
Hello. So I just yesterday I saw this from Yle. They say like there's a university in the let me see the name Lahti campus. So they say like half the teacher and student all from China, and some people from Finland worry about that. So I want to know how does all the professor think about this, because actually you are the one know about China more than the normal Finnish people. Yes.
I think this question is a Finnish question, so I have to take it. Yeah, because
Okay.
I think the audience is asking Yle. Yle is Finland's main television. So
Okay.
they had a report recently that one Finnish university decided to take a lot of Chinese students, and really a lot. And then the Finnish intelligence service has sent a warning that it seems that China has been trying to do kind of penetrate into the Finnish research institution and universities, and even using espionage. So it seems that the connection between these two events, like university having more Chinese students, and then there's a warning that China is really on our campus. Yeah, and my answer is a bit more diplomatic, but it's real. Is that in fact I think the Finnish government is very aware of the problems, the potential problems. Not like saying Chinese students are a problem, but the potential risk of having cooperation with China in the academic or educational setting. So they are crafting some kind of code of conduct, for universities to follow. And I think by the end of this year, hopefully, my understanding is this code of conduct will be issued. And at the same time, this is in line with already a discussion at the EU level and also at various member states, that in Germany, previously UK, but now UK is out, but the Netherlands and I think Sweden, several European countries also have started to craft this kind of policy guidelines. Some are not really binding, but at least some kind of raising awareness document that if you want to have more Chinese students, want to do something with them, you should take care of those issues. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I see 2 raised hands, now 3. First from Maria Sidivo, who teaches Chinese contemporary history and Chinese reforms at our university. Please.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I teach China's good strategies at Orientale in Naples, so I'm not expert of domestic politics in China and neither in Taiwan. But I would like to remember that the same aggressive, arrogant tones utilized by Xi Jinping now have been utilized by the then Premier Zhu Rongji in March 2000. So they belong to the Chinese leadership, not to a single leader, from my point of view. But anyway, the question is, what is the impact of Belt and Road Initiative on the relationship between European countries and Taiwan? Don't forget that many East European countries have been directly involved in loans, in projects, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marisa. Please, who wants to answer?
Excuse me, Federico, if you could repeat the question or very briefly, because I got my internet connection interrupted.
The question was on the impact,
Yes.
on the impact of the Belt and Road Initiative on this issue of the European Union positioning, right?
I don't know. I thought Linas would say something about Lithuania, because Lithuania left like 17+1. No?
Yes, indeed, Lithuania left this format, and actually one of the reasons was that the promises were not fulfilled, according to the Lithuanian government. After they tried to explain why they're leaving this format, there was, of course, expectation that more connections will be built and more trade and investment will come from China. And as I said, the amount of investment from China to Lithuania is very, very much limited. It's almost, if I'm not mistaken, maybe at some points even smaller than Lithuania is investing in China. So that creates quite a big, this very stark difference, this kind of picture. So Lithuania is not part of this format anymore. And even though Lithuania has signed this I forgot how officially they are named, this kind of memorandum of understanding or something like this with China about Belt and Road Initiative. But the activity is, of course, now suspended and nothing much happened. And actually, one of the reasons why things did not happen that much is that China approached Lithuania quite a few times, asking to invest in some areas that Lithuania was considering to be too sensitive and too strategic for Lithuania. Let's say there's a Klaipėda seaport, and Lithuania has very a short entrance to the Baltic Sea, which is very precious for Lithuania and very strategic, of course. So Lithuania is guarding its only port, basically, quite much from outside investment in a general sense. And when China approached with the suggestion, of course, that became even a bigger question. So Belt and Road Initiative is not making that much impact inroads into what's happening in Lithuania. I would say that quite a few countries from this format, they do not experience that much attention, maybe as they expected. So there are double doubts quite a bit about this. And furthermore, if you consider that format as into European Union context, coming back to this topic, it's dividing countries into these kind of clubs and formats, which could be again treated with suspicion from some countries, saying, wait a minute, why are you not interacting with European Union as a whole and designing the whole kind of strategy that would be kind of equal to equal kind of approach? But dividing it smaller countries means that these countries have to deal with much bigger partner, and negotiation could be also much more complicated. So these kind of reasonings and characteristics of Belt and Road approach from China, they are causing some difficulties to be implemented in practice. Maybe Vida also has some additions from her side.
Thank you, Linas. I would probably, I wouldn't have too much to add. You made the point that One Belt, One Road has been very ambiguous, let's say, received differently among countries. And over the time, I would say that countries' perception has changed, because this is probably one of the major concerns in the European capitals, right? On the one hand, what kind of threats it brings along, what are the goals, and on the other hand, it has also been an kind of contagious issue, because some countries have joined the project. Like among G7, it's only Italy, I believe, that has signed the agreement. So it's something that it's an issue that has been very divisive in the EU. And again, Linas, as you said, that it's why not to deal with it at the EU level? Why to divide the countries or have separate Central Eastern Europe plus China framework? So it's, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question well. Like I said, my internet connection got interrupted, but it's something that has been causing increasing concern, and specifically because some countries perceive it as China's attempt to take over strategic sectors like ports, electricity infrastructure, and well, that's why it's pretty difficult to move on. And European countries are really taking it with caution now. I'm not talking for like all the countries, but some countries for sure. Yeah, so that's just basically emphasizing the same points that Linas has raised. Thank you.
I just want to add that Maria, sorry, there's echoing again. So Maria was asking also about Taiwan's role in this. Apparently Taiwan is not part of this Belt and Road Initiative, but I think what is happening now, particularly with the recent Taiwanese delegation to Lithuania and Czech Republic and Slovakia, is to look for opportunities for investment, for economic cooperation. So it's not really Belt and Road, but in a way it's related to let those EU members member states to think whether there's opportunity to really benefit from having a warmer relationship with Taiwan. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all.
And Vida also talked about Italy, right? The role of Italy, and I think it's interesting that in the last 4 years or so we have witnessed an interesting shift also in the Italian government's position. In immediately after the elections, when we had the first Conte government with the Five Stars movement and the Northern League or the League, especially the Five Star movements were very close to Beijing. And that was part of their platform, I think, at the beginning. Now we have a softer approach from the Five Star movements, I think, regarding China, and the Northern League. So the other half of that coalition has become more and more vocal against China now. And one of the MEPs that was visiting Taiwan was from the Lega, from Salvini's party. And also Draghi, the prime minister, has shown, I think, a slightly tougher approach towards China, although not as in some Eastern European countries. But for example, during the G20, he asked the foreign minister, the Chinese foreign minister, to restart the EU-China dialogue on human rights, for example. So has tried to bring the Italian position a bit closer to the European Union institutions' position, I think. But that demonstrates also what we said at the beginning, the importance of the political internal dynamics in each of the EU countries. And just to add something personally, I think that this is also a problem from the Chinese perspective, understanding how the European Union works. This is difficult also for us as Europeans, right, to understand how the EU exactly works. But there are so many different levels, and they are all influenced by democratic procedures of some kind. So I think that in some cases, these reactions from the Chinese side that, of course, are aroused by the symbolic importance of some European gestures lack the understanding of how a complex structure like the EU works. And in some cases, they just make the situation worse than it was before, because they should understand that in some cases in democratic structures, you can have initiatives that are minor initiatives that are important from a symbolic point of view, but they do not necessarily affect broader political interactions. But from the Chinese side, even the smallest of action has a huge symbolic meaning and causes a reaction. And I think that these different languages of political behavior are very much visible in this interaction. Now we have two more questions from Ivan Babi and Natalie Maviki. Ivan, please.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all, and really thank you for your amazing speeches. I'm Ivan, and I'm a student from L'Orientale, specializing in international relations institution of Asia and Africa. And I have a question for you. Is more a prediction, a future prediction. What do you think about it from a military point of view? So, in case, for example, of an attack to Taiwan by the People's Republic of China, what do you think will be the position of the European Union? So will be there an approach, for example, of only sanctions like it has been with Hong Kong, or will be there a more proactive approach, and not like only from the European Union, but more from member states, because we know there is not a European Union army. But for example, in this case, will they align with the United States, with Japan, or because we also seen like the French position, because they strengthened their position in the Indo-Pacific. So what will be their position in case of an attack? Thank you so much.
This is like reading tea leaves, you know. And there are many scenarios that we can create. Let's see what's in my cup. My prediction is very conservative. I think EU basically will just have some sort of sanction and a symbolic messages, while the actual war will be given to the United States, whether they want to have a some sort of military intervention. Well, I don't know about what's in your cup, Linas or Vida.
Linas, will you, or may I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Well, I wouldn't take the responsibility reading from that cup. I mean, I wouldn't dare to predict what specifically would happen, but I do not think European countries would get involved. Indeed, there is nothing binding for them. There is no commitment that they would get involved militarily, and I cannot at the moment. Of course, like I said, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but at the point, like now, I don't see how they or why they would get involved. Indeed, France, for example, has been more active in the region with the patrols, like regarding the freedom of navigation. But I think this is a very separate issue when it comes to Taiwan, and it is. Should there be a military conflict, I do not think there would be major, on the ground involvement from the European countries. Definitely, they would, of course, sanctions and such would follow, but not direct participation. I see this very difficult. Thank you. Sorry, Linas. I think I came just jumped into. Please.
No, everything is fine, and indeed, it's prediction quite a large one that we have to deal with, and one of the keywords, of course, in this case is strategic ambiguity, that it's practiced by the United States, of course, and we know this keyword from there. But I think this strategic ambiguity is more extended because through what United States is doing, of course, NATO as a larger bloc is affected by this as well. And if United States is initiating something in the military sense, some kind of campaign, for example, then of course NATO will have to react to this, and United States will pressure NATO countries to join, especially if some kind of interpretation could be managed to saying that, well, it's falls under the responsibility of NATO to do something together. So that opens doors for quite many European countries actually to do something together, of course on their own kind of individual basis, to join this campaign or not. And well, quite a few countries we could predict would be willing to dedicate some of the resources for that. But of course, we are thinking about these military alliances up to this point, and using the strategic ambiguity in that area. When it comes to European Union, as it was mentioned, well, European Union has very few tools to use in these kind of occasions. And of course, economic sanctions and things like that could be used. Of course, they would have to be very carefully calculated, and we could have doubts how much European Union can really have strong sanctions to really hurt China and punish China for behavior like this. So I have quite many doubts that the European Union could be used as a powerful, some kind of reaction to this kind of scenario. So yes, strategic ambiguity. It's actually, this keyword is allowing for everyone to have a cup with tea leaves and read them. And since everyone understands that we are reading tea leaves, it's actually creating this stability of some sort. Everyone is afraid to make some drastic step because some tea leaf readers would say that would be really, really bad thing. Let's stick to status quo. That's longer. Let's see how that will develop further. So this ambiguity, it's a headache for us, of course, to make interpretations, but in reality, it's actually giving some. It has a practical value, I would say.
Thank you. We have our last question from Natalie Maviki, please.
Mine is more of an opinion, and just a question for your opinion as well. Why don't the Taiwanese just take an ignorant approach? So, for example, while the EU and UN figures out how they want to operate, they just invite Taiwan and extend the invitation to China, for example, to the COP26 that was just held. I was confused as to why they didn't extend an invitation to Taiwan. Of course, the reasons are quite obvious, right? That, it would cause a diplomatic phase. But on the other hand, I'm also thinking that maybe Taiwan should also just be ignorant and organize its sideline events, like the recent climate change event, I think that they held in Glasgow also, and had invited quite a lot of European diplomats and all. And then, of course, China would try to persuade the other parties not to attend, but they would still be making headways into international politics.
So I think you're suggesting some innovative approach for the Taiwanese government to make a breakthrough, side events everywhere.
Yes.
And then depending on who has the gut to attend the side events. Honestly, I don't know, Natalie. I guess a lot of politicians or representatives who attend those kind of big meetings, they understand what their behavior means. And they are very cautious. Unless they want to be seen as being super supportive of Taiwan, I don't think they will attend the side event. So that makes the Taiwanese government feeling that it's a waste of money to do that. I don't know.
There's nothing to lose, right?
Yes, nothing to lose, and you might just be able to lure one or two officials from the main meeting to go to your side event. But what do you get from that? A side event cannot also produce any powerful, meaningful statements beyond a symbolic, thing. I don't know. I don't know what other people think.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I could interrupt with this, my opinion. Yes, well, side events are usually, side events on the side, and they are more like to give insights about one thing or another usually, and they are focused on business community or maybe on civil society. So non-governmental entities basically are joining these side events. Of course, there are some of these meetings that would be on the higher diplomatic or governmental level, but mostly side events are these. Well, it's non-governmental in their nature. So for Taiwan, of course, it's possible to send civil society representatives, and Taiwan is doing that very actively and supporting civil society on a large scale. And so you could see Taiwanese activists and movements and NGOs and so on participating in many kind of international meetings when civil society is allowed there, or business community to some degree. But when it comes to officials, well, it's not their chair to sit on, basically. And one more thing maybe could be considered as, well, to some degree, pride of Taiwanese government is how much would you like to be sitting in some inferior chair just because you could sit in that chair, but you would not be allowed to the main meeting. And this is also something to consider, that, like Julie said, what would be the practical gains from that, and or maybe that would be kind of accepting your lower grade position for Taiwanese government, which could also be a factor to consider. So that would be my thoughts.
Well, just to add an anecdote, I know sometimes Taiwan diplomats, they are being invited as journalists in other governments events. Okay, it's innovative and you allow them in, but as a Taiwan citizen, I feel very humiliated, right? It's like our officials are being treated as journalists. It's better not to show up. I don't know. This is my personal view.
If I may add a very short and actually basic comment. Natalie, I see your point, like, why not to have this parallel route, right? And what Julie said, that it's not gonna work, it's not going to work, and well, Taiwanese authorities know it in advance. Why they know it? Because every country which has diplomatic relations with China are basically committed to not having relations with Taiwan. Like in the case of Lithuania, right? In 1991, in September, when the two countries, Lithuania and PRC, People's Republic of China, officially inaugurated their diplomatic relations, they made the so-called joint communique, the public statement saying that Lithuania admits that there is only adheres to one China policy, and admits that Taiwan is an integral part of China. And that's where everything starts. Wherever Taiwan starts doing with other countries, that's a very basic explanation, but indeed that's how it works. Whatever Taiwan seeks to do with other countries that have relations with China, it becomes a triangular relation. And that's a diplomatic relation between China and another country, and then Taiwan. And Taiwan just ends up being, once again, as it was said now by Linas and Julie, in this inferior position, just some kind of a region. Because as a foreign minister of a country, I may want to express my support for Taiwan as a democratic state, but I cannot because my country is committed. And that's it. I may want to go and attend the official meeting that I'm invited to by Taiwanese authorities, but my country officially holds that it doesn't exist, a country like Taiwan. So that's a very simple and oversimplified in a way explanation, but I hope it answers your question.
Okay, thank you. So if we don't have any other question, well, I would like to thank all of you. And of course, we cannot foresee the future, but we can comment on it. Maybe next year we will meet again and see what has happened throughout the next 12 months, if there will be interesting, hopefully not too interesting, because when you talk about Taiwan, interesting developments means something not too good, I think. But let's see what happens in the next year, and hopefully we will talk about that again. And this event was recorded and it will be also available online, right, Julie?
Yes, so if you allow, I can share on the Helsinki YouTube very soon. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you again. Have a nice day and see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Keep in touch, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.